Cybersecurity Professionals Meetup Group. I am Tyrone E. Wilson, the founder and CEO of Cover6 Solutions. We also organize the Meetup Group, the DC Cybersecurity Professionals. We are over 8,500 strong, always looking for more members. I'm very happy to have built a community where we can share information, build everyone up, and root each other on as we grow in our professions. Today we have a really good meetup planned. So we have Chantel Sims, Arash Parsa, and we were supposed to have Blake Reagan. Blake couldn't make it today. So I am going to fill in for Blake. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk pen testing, right? We want to keep it, real rap raw with everyone. And, I reached out to Chantel and Arash for a reason. And it's because, I didn't want to have folks that were on, that have been pen testing 20, 30 years and have been biased, right? I wanted to have people on, that are, earlier in their careers and essentially in a place where you may want to be one day. So I figured it would be great to open that up, and have them just keep it real with everyone about what this pen test life is really like. I do a lot of pen testing every single day. I do at a minimum 3 to 5 engagements a month. So, I have some experience as well that I'm willing to speak to. So let's go. We ready? For anyone that has a question, please use the questions panel and, we'll get it into this, into the slide deck. They haven't seen the questions, so let's go. All right, let's kick it off. Tell us about yourself, Chantel.
Okay, what do you want to know? Career-wise?
Just who you are, what you do, what you're willing to say, and maybe, a really quick word of encouragement, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. So hi, everyone. Thanks for being here today. My name is Chantel, obviously, as you can see there. Currently, I work as an InfoSec analyst and pen tester for Northern Trust. They're a financial solutions company / bank. I had a non-traditional route into cybersecurity or info security. I don't really care which words people use. I know some people don't like cybersecurity. But I know prior to coming to cybersecurity, I actually worked in education. So I was teaching and teaching within Chicago public schools. And I've always been into computers, so it was always a hobby on the side. And I've always loved taking them apart, rebuilding them, programming. I initially thought that I really wanted to go into software engineering because of how much I loved programming at the time. So when I looked to going back to school, I knew I didn't want to go into a tremendous amount of debt. So I went the boot camp route, and I attended Evolve Security Academy. And it was hands down the best decision I ever made. So I went through their program. It was really intense. Prior to getting into the program, I had already become curious about hacking / pen testing. So I had already started to dabble in it before starting the boot camp. But once I got in the boot camp, one of the requirements is to do an actual engagement for a nonprofit. And that gave me a lot of exposure to like some red team things. So I got to do some social engineering, some hacking, of course. I got to do a physical pen test for the particular nonprofit we did the assessment for. So I got a lot out of that. And I got my Security Plus right before leaving the program and had like quite a few offers before leaving the program. And ultimately decided on taking the position that offered me less money because I wanted the experience for pen testing. I don't necessarily recommend that you do that, but the experience for having like hands-on pen testing, especially as my first official year, in cybersecurity, it was just invaluable to me. So took that opportunity, came in as a junior analyst and pen tester, got even more exposure to hacking into like enterprise networks and so forth. And then an opportunity came up with Northern Trust, where I am essentially, I've rotated every 6 months for the past 2 years. I'll actually be done next month. Rotated every 6 months through a different InfoSec department. So because I came in with pen testing experience, they immediately threw me into red team operations, which was a lot of fun, and it really solidified for me that that's my thing, and I really thrive there. And then I also rotated to the secure development team to help them with writing secure code, and worked on a two-factor application. And I've rotated through IT auditing, which is really intense and is not my thing. And I'm basically wrapping up right now with vulnerability management, which is my comfort zone. So once I'm done with this, I have the option of course, continuing with the red team there or moving on somewhere else. So I'm weighing my options right now. So that's where I am. Yep.
Cool. Arash, go ahead.
Sure. So I started pen testing around 2016. I had no experience. I literally just jumped in. I said, I love computers. I actually went to school for advertising. I wasn't great at it. I was better with computers. So I started out with the OSCP. You know, I asked a bunch of friends, I'm like, how do you get into security? Everybody's like, you want to get into security, get your OSCP, anyone will hire you. And so that's exactly what I did. I started the OSCP sometime around like March of 2016. It took me until September. I passed my first try. My career began. After that, I started getting really heavily involved in the community. I do a lot of talks. I do CTFs at a lot of conferences, both creating them and participating in them. I've taught classes before at various B-sides. I've taught intro to CTF many times, for example. I help the open source community a lot. I help people make GUIs for their projects because that's usually the bane of everyone's existence. So I do a lot of fun JavaScript stuff for that. My career right now, I'm a threat hunter. So what I do is I hunt advanced persistent threats. So as part of my job, I also do red teaming and a little bit of pen testing, but my main role is to look for new and advanced TTPs. I try and create alerts for these TTPs within my EDR solutions, and I try to hunt all the APTs that I can.
Nice. So I'll tell a little bit about myself, and then I also talk about Arash. So Tyrone, 25 years in cyber. About 6 or 7 years ago, I went off into started studying for the OSCP. I have not passed the OSCP yet, but I am in the labs again and plan to take it very soon. So with that said, I ended up being a part, I guess you can call it a red team for a company called Fortalice. That's where I finally got my first start pen testing, doing different engagements, going out to different places. I really loved it. But then, I always had this desire to start my own company and do it on my own. And what I did was I used my notes for the OSCP to create a pen tester prep workshop. And what happened is that, I guess the students started vouching for me, and it ended up with me getting more pen test engagements until finally, we ended up getting a really good contract to where, we're doing, vulnerability assessments and pen tests every month. A few years back, I met Arash because, I started, I was one of the founders of a company called HackTheBox. And, the goal was to provide this, Arash, 8 or 9 weeks of training. So 4 weeks of defensive training, 4 weeks of offensive training. And, there was hundreds of people that submitted, for the class because it was going to be free. Arash was the very first person that I interviewed after sorting through, the hundreds of people. We, looked at all of the resumes and stuff, got down to, I think, the top 40. for 50, and I ended up interviewing 40 something people in 4 days. Arash was the very first person. And I remember thinking, if everyone is going to be like Arash, we're going to have, we're going to have a lot of trouble, getting people in the class. So, he talked about the OSCP and how he crushed all the boxes. And, he's a really, really, really smart guy. And does a lot of the CTF environment for some of the conferences, right? So you'll see, really, really smart, and also did a buffer overflow talk for us. So we talked a little bit about the journey, right? This didn't refresh, but the question is going to be, if you could start over, it didn't refresh yet. But the question is, if you could start over, what would you do different? Anyone can take that.
Yeah, I could start. So I've actually thought about this before, and I think one thing I would have done differently, like in the very beginning, is not necessarily seeking permission to start hacking, if that makes sense. So in other words, typically when people are first getting into pen testing and so forth, they, might reach out to me or other people and say, hey, where do I start? And I agree with a lot of the answers, like start with Security Plus, start A, B, and C. Like there's just like no one right path. And I started with Security Plus. Well, technically, I guess I started with hacking and then Security Plus, but I think it really messed with me having confidence in my ability, because I was just like, well, if I don't have these 10 certs, then there's no way I'm going to be able to actually hack and so forth, So it really taught me to follow my curiosity, because when I followed my curiosity, I inadvertently end up learning so much more. So I really would have honestly just like dived even deeper into pen testing at the beginning, following my curiosity. Eventually I got there to where I was just like, I don't care, I'm interested, I want to learn it, and I went and learned it, but in the beginning I definitely would have did it more.
Cool.
Yeah, for me, I really feel like I did it really right. And I'm not trying to sound arrogant here or anything. My first job wasn't even a pen testing position. My first job was actually operations and engineering. And I think that first job has helped me more than anything else in my career. So getting my OSCP to learn pen testing, and then getting an engineering job to actually learn the internals. How do proxies work? How do firewalls work? What do all of these look like? How do they interact with each other? I got to approve the rules. I got to be the one who said, oh yeah, we can approve that firewall rule or something like that. And that really gives you insight into what your users are doing on networks. It really gives you insight into a legitimate activity. I did like this really progressive path where I didn't even become a pen tester really ever. In fact, after I did incident response, I joined a red team. I did pen testing and red teaming there for a little bit too. But every single role I've been in, because I've gotten to put my hands into a little bit of everything, they let me continue doing everything. That's why even though now I'm a threat hunter, they actually still give me red teams. They still say, hey, Arash, you want to pen test this network? And I'm like, yeah, sure, I'd love to. So I really feel like getting that experience is really helpful.
Yeah, most definitely. Most definitely. I feel like if I could start over, I would probably do something really difficult first, but not try to pass the exam, like the OSCP. I feel like, sometimes I tell people who want to do pen testing, sometimes I'm like, stop everything that you're doing right now and go after the OSCP. And that doesn't mean like paying for the material. It's identifying what's in that material and then start learning all of those topics within that material, or at least, find the Pentest Plus exam objectives, which they put out in PDF form, and go through all of those things along with the CEH, so you can actually see some of the tools as well. That's definitely something I would do, and I would take my time with it as well. And that kind of leads us in to the next question, like, what do you feel should be a focus, for learning about the job? Anyone want to take that?
Yeah, I can.
Like a primary focus. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's see. Primary focus for learning about the job, I would say, I guess this is probably an obvious answer, but networking, understanding how networks actually work, because it really makes things even easier down the road. I think if I didn't understand how networks worked before I got into pen testing, it certainly would have been more difficult to grasp a lot of the topics. So truly understanding networking, like you don't have to be an expert per se at networking, but you need to understand what's going on behind the scenes. And also I would say just giving yourself hands-on experience with what it is you want to do, right? So something I tell my mentees a lot is like, if you want to, say be a red teamer, then build out a red team lab at home. Like I've built out multiple environments, right? And put myself in like these pretend scenarios of just like, okay, if I'm a sys admin and I configure the environment this way, how could I bypass that from a red team perspective, and so forth. So the focus should really be understanding networking, and when I say networking, of course, computer networks, and also just learning how to actually use the tools that are needed.
Cool. Arash, you want to chime in?
Yeah. I actually, I agree with networking, but I agree with networking in the other sense of networking, and that this job isn't, just about, it's a lot of understanding how networks actually integrate with each other too, and it's a lot of understanding how you can actually talk to other people too. So understanding those technical details on how different networks interact is massive, because as you start to pivot through networks and you understand how different VLANs work and this sort of thing, I mean, you're a network penetration tester or you're an app penetration tester. And if you're a network penetration tester, knowing that is going to be exponentially more useful, and understanding filtration channels and things like that. But regular networking is also so beneficial in the fact that if I ever, for any reason, need a new job, I'm not worried. I have so many friends, so many people I've helped, so many different people that are interested because I put myself out there. So you should go to these conferences. You should put yourself out there. Absolutely. You should do some talks. You should make some tools. And a lot of people think, oh, I'm too new. My tools aren't that great. I made really, really basic bash tools as part of PWK with like no experience. And then I just went to IRC channels and I shared it. And I actually got a lot of people that liked it. So if you think there's really nothing I can contribute, that's just not true. There's always something you can contribute. Even if you think you don't know anything, that's also not true. Something someone on your team doesn't. So just, you should focus on learning these technical aspects, but you should also completely understand that interacting with people is part of the job too, and building these relationships is so important.
Okay, but I think you had a coding background, correct?
No, I actually didn't. I started, my coding background was 2 months of Python scripting and WordPress development. I had no coding background. I literally dropped out of college. I became a business analyst at a company that did telecom stuff, but I didn't do anything technical for them. In fact, I tried to get them to make me an IT technician, but they're like, you have nothing on your resume. You don't have a master's degree. They wanted somebody with a master's degree. They're like, there's no possible way you could be an efficient IT technician for us. Joke's on them. But, I actually, nobody really gave me a chance until I got that OSCP. And I really did, I really do believe, people say the OSCP is hard. It is. It's one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. But if you buckle down, you read that PDF, you read that video, it really does teach you everything. I didn't even know what pipes were until I started PWK. I'm like, oh my God, how many different kind of pipes are there? I'm so scared. There's like this right thing and this left thing and this little like line,
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, I think a focus could be, why a tool works as opposed to how a tool works, whatever that tool may be, right? So, understanding that not, I mean, it's more than just understanding the output. It's like why that output came out that way. Then another thing I also like is like the timing, of the output. You know what I mean? So, and I'm sure like if you use tools and there's like even a slight delay in the response of a tool, like you can almost feel like there's something wrong, right? And either maybe you should run the command again or start over or something. Like I almost always feel that way.
Oh, I agree.
All right. We talk about the OSCP a lot, right? And I know I even mentioned that, someone should, stop what they're doing right now if you want to be a pen tester and start going over that material. So for someone that is starting from, from scratch, how long do you think that would take to pass that cert?
I have experience with this, coming from a guy who started from scratch. It took me 6.5 months, but I treated this like college. I had no job. I was living with my parents. I literally did this for like 12, 14 hours a day. It was a lot of work for 6 months. I'd say if you did 8 hours a day, it could even take a year maybe, because I'm putting in like those 4 hours extra effort. But do understand, there were instances I would do web applications and I didn't understand how query parameters work. So I'd be like $user equals 1, $param equals 2. And I'm like, why isn't this working? It's driving me crazy. So it's a lot of the reason it takes so long is because you're not just learning about the OSCP. If you have no experience like me, you're also just learning about everything in general. And so it's okay. It might take you a year. That's okay. You're learning a lot of things, But if anybody tells you, oh, you're a newbie, there's no way you can pass, not true. Anyone and everyone has the ability to pass, even as a beginner. Even OPSEC says this is an entry-level certificate. So if you put in the effort, I guarantee everyone can pass.
So, they talk about that entry level a lot, right? And I feel like it's subjective. So entry level for a pen tester is not the same as entry level for, let's just say, like a system admin or a network admin, right?
Agreed.
So I feel like you can come on and create accounts and remove accounts and change passwords, but to be an entry level pen tester, right? Like not many people are just gonna send you out on an engagement alone, if you've only got 3 or 4 months in. Do you know what I mean? I just think that's kind of subjective. And yes, you can pass. Yes, they technically give you all you need to pass that OSCP exam. But man, I have taken it twice, and it was totally different every single time.
Yeah, it's brutal. I don't disagree there. Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely is. I'm about to have my retake, I think at the beginning of May. And I know the first time I went through it, quite honestly, I really think it was a lot of my nerves that got the best of me.
Yeah.
Because I took the ECPPT exam. I failed it the first time because I just completely overthought it. But taking it, the second time and going through it and everything, I was like, oh, this is way easier than I'm like really, I don't know. I was just overthinking it. Luckily, I passed that one. But I know, what's his name? Is his name John Hammond?
Yeah.
Yeah, John Hammond. He did a review about his OSCP and ECPPT experience. And he was saying how if you can pass the ECPPT, you should be able to pass the OSCP. So I'm kind of counting on that. But no, I get it now that I have experience with the OSCP at least. And now that I've passed the ECPPT, I'm understanding it more now. Just like, I mean, you really just have to dig in, but yeah.
Okay, cool. We had a specific question for you, Chantel. Did you take any classes in Linux to be a pen tester?
Yes. So one of the biggest requirements for being a part of the Evolve program, and one of the first things that we had to learn on our own prior to starting the boot camp was Linux commands and how it works and everything. So yes, I did.
Okay. And then a follow-up OSCP question. Do you all feel that passing the OSCP would guarantee a job?
No.
That's a tough one, right? So you know how we were talking about networking earlier, and how Arash, like you mentioned, like networking with the community as well, like that plays a big part in it, right? So if you're somebody that's off on the side, you pass the OSCP and you're still struggling to look for a job, but you don't interact with anybody and nobody knows you, it certainly plays into that. And I actually know someone that's sort of going through that right now.
Personally, I don't feel like it would guarantee you a job, but I do feel like, you know, you are gonna bypass a lot of the questions, that they would ask in an interview that
I
they
disagree.
wouldn't ask,
In my experience, when I first got my OSCP, you looked at my resume, you saw, oh, this guy is a business analyst, he's advertising, he has an OSCP. Everyone thought I was a liar. Everyone thought I was a liar. They asked me the hardest questions. Nobody even believed I had the cert. It was really hard.
True.
I only got a job because of my connections. If I had no connections, I don't think anybody would have believed me.
True, but I think you were what, like 22, 23?
Yeah, I was like 23 at the time. Yeah, that's right.
Okay. All right. What's a typical engagement like from start to finish, really quick? And then we have some follow-up questions too about team makeup and the reporting. Who wants to go?
I can go.
Okay.
So I've done, of course, pen test engagements with my company where I work right now, and also outside of that, doing some freelance stuff for a friend of mine that runs a company. So typically, from the start, we're getting the necessary sign-offs from everyone. Well, even before we start to get sign-offs, we actually have meetings, multiple meetings with the client who needs the pen test, to understand their needs, to understand their network or concerns and things of that sort. And then from there, we have to get all of the sign-offs, right? So sign-offs are basically just like your permission slip for being able to actually do the engagement. So once we have the necessary sign-offs, and depending on the scope, the established scope from the client, well, between the client and us, we then essentially start with the typical steps of any recon, if that's involved. Sometimes it's not. If it's just one web app that's being pen test, the scope is just like go to the website and break it, right? So yeah, basically breaking the application, within scope, cleaning up after our attacks, which is very important. And then once we've cleaned up after attacks, it's then going to note all our findings, and well, you should be noting along the way, but basically just generating your report on those findings. And then once we generate that report and get approved to go back to the client to read it out to them, we then do that and give them our recommendations for how to remediate any of vulnerabilities that we found during the test.
Okay. How many people normally do the talking to the customer?
I would say maybe 2 of us, like out of 5 people on the testing team.
Okay.
Maybe
wow.
Yeah, it really depends, right? So like, yeah, it's usually like 2 of us that might talk. The ones that like were mainly.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, I'm saying I feel like I had good, like 5 people to go on an engagement that must have been some pretty big ones. Because I know a
Oh,
lot of organizations will try to like make it as minimal as
oh yeah,
possible.
definitely. I know it's mostly been the red team engagements that I've done where it's been 5 of us on it.
Okay,
But I know I've definitely been on engagements where it's just been myself and me and one other person.
okay.
Yeah.
Um, I'll take that a little bit. So typically we would like to have at least 3. So one would be the pen test lead or the exploit lead, and then there would be an operator who wants to be the exploit lead, and then there's like a PM person, right? That's just there to make sure everything like goes well. Um, and we'll do a lot of the logistical um, operations along with the RMF stuff, the risk management framework stuff. So it'd be like 2 separate teams, like a pen test team and then the RMF team that does the interviews, can ask all the questions and checks the paperwork and stuff. But that individual often wanted to be a pen tester as well. But what we would do is the RMF person would also help with the report because you can be flying through the engagement, right? And you forget the document stuff and it just doesn't look pretty, right? As um, you know, the findings and all that stuff. Um, but then the pen test lead would be the one, or the exploit lead would be the one that talks the most. And if the operator can follow up, then they follow up. Arash? Well, Chantel, you done?
Yep, I'm done on my end.
Okay. Arash?
Yeah, it's basically the same process whenever I've done a typical engagement. First we start out, we scope it, we say, what don't you want us to touch? There's always a bunch of systems they don't want you touching because they're essential to their mission or for work or whatever. And so we're like, okay, so these are blacklisted, don't touch those. And then the first thing we do is like, we just enumerate. We enumerate everything. That's what you're going to hear a lot of that in Oscp. Enumerate. Find all the ports you can, find all the services you can, ban or grab everything, look for low-hanging fruit, look for anonymous FTP, anonymous VNC servers, any, anonymous SMB access, anything that just looks interesting. It's really easy. And then we look for exploits for stuff we do. We have a lot of I've been on teams where we have a lot of in-house custom exploits that we just run on them real quick. We're like, here's a list of all the versions from all the systems we scanned that are vulnerable to this. We just quickly run it against every single one of them. We get our shells back. The end is the report. The report is sometimes fun, sometimes boring. It depends on the engagement. It also depends on what findings we have. I've written reports. I've been thankful. I've never actually had to write a report. Somebody's always been assigned to me, and that person always just does the report for me. The only report I've ever done was actually on a recent red team engagement I just did, but that was really easy. They give you a template. The company loves their templates. They're like, use this template. Here's your table of contents. Here's some interesting findings. You give like the executive summary at the top because there's going to be the higher ups. They're not very technical. The VP just wants to know, listen, man, how many of these are bad? And then, the guys on the lower level are like, all right, how do we actually fix this? Because if the problem exists in the first place, it could potentially be because they just didn't know it was a problem. They don't know how to resolve it and so forth. So a lot of our job isn't just, breaking in and, just dropping the mic and walking out like, hey, we're done. We totally destroyed you guys. Figure it out. It's like, this is how you can remediate. That's really what our job is about, is teaching people how to remediate.
You are so lucky. Because the writing the report sometimes, like, it drives me crazy, but yeah.
Yeah. How large are their reports typically?
Ooh, it can vary depending on the scope, right? So I know the longest report that I've done from a pen test engagement, maybe, what was that? Maybe like 115 pages.
Yeah.
But
Mhm.
Yeah, I know for red team engagements, I've definitely had a report where it was longer than that, but I had help with that report, thank God.
Mhm.
That was probably easily 140 pages.
Especially with the appendixes and all of that stuff.
Yeah, it like really adds up,
Yeah.
and the screenshots, like that's why
Right.
it's so many pages. So don't be scared about the length of the report. Yeah, you do have to like make sure you're communicating well through it, but you
Mhm.
also have to like show the actual evidence with screenshots and
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, right, like if you go online and look for like sample pen test reports, there's like a giant GitHub repository of it. But those sample reports are only like 18 pages long. And I'm like, I know that this ain't
Yeah.
this ain't
Yeah,
heavy.
it's so unrealistic. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. What are some CTF events you feel people could use to learn? And then the next question is going to get deep, so I hope y'all are ready. Go
Okay.
ahead. Uh-huh.
The first CTF, event. Well, I don't know if it's events. Well, I always direct people straight to Try Hack Me because I think they do a really good job of holding beginners' hands with CTFs. So yeah, their number one recommendation. And I kind of want to say Range Force 2 is not as CTF-y, but depending on what modules you're doing or whatever, it can be really helpful.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, Try Hack Me has been great. Arash?
Oh, I can make you a list. So I think what's great is VulnHub. Anything that has a walkthrough is spectacular because especially as you're starting out, you don't know everything. It's people say don't use the walkthrough, try harder. I disagree. If you're starting out, do use the walkthrough. If you're starting out, go till you hit a wall, then use the walkthrough. See what you can find because it may just be some new trick you don't know about. It may be something you need to learn. So Try Hack Me is great because of that. VulnHub is great. Any old boxes and HackTheBox are great. CTF time is spectacular. Even if you don't do good in the CTF, people always release write-ups afterwards so you can see how the challenges were done. CTF time has all the CTFs all over the world. You should be monitoring that anytime you want to do a CTF. The list goes on and on and on. But Carnegie Mellon, I think, I'm not sure I mentioned that. They have a really, really, really good beginner CTF platform set up. Full walkthroughs and everything. If you Google like Carnegie Mellon CTF 2018 or something like that, you should be able to find it. I think all of these are spectacular. And I really want to reiterate, it's okay if you have to use a walkthrough. You're starting out. You need to learn some stuff. So don't feel ashamed for it. You know, I have a lot of people telling me, no, I can't use the walkthrough. I'm like, why not? What if it's just a trick you don't know yet? That's what the walkthrough will teach you. Yeah.
You know what learning platform used to upset me because you would always talk about it in
Which one?
class, and then half the class would be addicted to the challenges. It's the over the wire.
Oh yeah, Over the Wire is super fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, Tyrone.
No, it's cool.
I
It's
am
cool.
so sorry.
I wanted to get a good laugh in before I ask this next question. And, I'm asking it because, there have been engagements where, I'm traveling to, obscure parts of the country and, it comes to my mind, right? So let's talk about it. So the next question is, ready? When it comes to social engineering, do you feel your race comes into play? And is that necessarily a good thing?
Ooh, this is a good one right here. Okay.
Who wants to take it?
I will take it because this
Okay.
is something I've actually thought about a lot, right? So there's that quote by Malcolm X, that says the most the most ignored, basically the most ignored person in America is the Black woman.
Yeah.
And that's there's a lot that's true in there, So what I would say, or what I learned from when I was doing red team engagements, was that to an extent, it actually worked to my benefit. So part of thinking about like the wireless engagement we had to do, where we had to go to multiple buildings. My company has like 6 or 7 buildings downtown, and we had to basically go and attack the networks, right? And when you're doing wireless hacking, you typically have a wireless adapter plugged into a computer, you know. So with my psychology background and knowing that, you know, unconscious bias exists, I use it to my advantage in some different places, knowing that they would either, one, ignore me, or 2, I would stick out like a sore thumb and I would be questioned. Luckily, 1 happened most of the time where they would just like ignore me, right? It only happened 1 time during one of the engagements where a guy walked up to me and was just like, I gotta know what you're doing. What are you doing here? You know, type of thing. Yeah, it's hard. It honestly can go both ways. And I've thought about this a lot, but I really think about it a lot of times, like being able to work for me because of unconscious bias and just using that to really to have an even more successful engagement.
Yeah, I thanks, Craig. I fixed the question. I threw in the gender as well, because we don't want to forget that. So your race or gender comes into play.
Oh yeah, definitely. Because I mean, you got to think too. I mean, I know when if you don't know me personally or we haven't talked online or anything like that, the first thing you're not gonna assume about me is that I hack.
Yeah.
You're not going to assume that.
And how does that make you feel?
It pisses me off sometimes, not gonna lie. It pisses me off in the sense of just like wanting to just be, you know, just wanting to just be literally and just like do my thing without any worry of bias or, you know, gender bias coming into play either, you know. But I also know that I'm underestimated even more because of it. And I feel like, quite honestly, this year has been the year for me where I've learned to just say like, yeah, fuck anything that, oh, excuse me, I'm like dropping F-bombs, forgive me. Forget anything that anyone has to say. I've been much more vocal this year too. I don't work with a lot of tech bros at Northern Trust right now, but there is a tech bro there, and I've had to shut him down multiple times, and it's really been like building my confidence. And I haven't been doing it in a bullying way, but it's very evident in the way that people talk to you sometimes. They'll talk down to me as if I don't understand basic security concepts.
Do you feel an inherent need to represent for everyone that's coming after you?
Oh my God. Oh yeah, that's a big question. So it's also something I thought about too. And in some ways, yes. I mean, ultimately, I know I do this work because I truly enjoy it, and I'm very intentional about doing work that makes me happy, right? But I also understand the impact that I have in the space that I'm in. So I'm very aware of, or I feel like I have this responsibility to like help even more Black women or just Black people in general, like get to where they want to, you know? And it's always why I'm willing to like mentor or help them in any type of way.
Yeah, it can be very draining, right? But knowing that people, you know, are behind you, like that gives you that energy to like keep going.
It truly does. I agree.
I always like to touch on like the personal aspects of different jobs because, you know, it's more than just technical expertise. It's more than just people saying, if you have the skills, you can get the job, right? Yes, but there's a lot more that comes with it, like especially, you know, when you have to travel, right? You have to go on site, you have to be someone else. And, you know, some of the things that I kind of struggle with is when it's time to pick roles that would be quote unquote believable, right? And sometimes it's interesting to see what role your coworker is going to pick for you or suggest for you, right? So Tyrone doesn't want to be the maintenance man all the time, right?
Yeah.
And I got a funny story. Some of the things I like to do is like when we go on site, you know how you gotta go on site early, and there's name badges waiting for you, right? Oftentimes, and someone's got to give you your badge. So one of my favorite things to do is just to see if they're gonna guess that I'm Tyrone on the badge, right? No, clearly, it's there. So sometimes I just like to see, how they do it. And most of the time, they're pretty nice and they'll be like, so, which one of you is Tyrone? I'm like, come on, come on. You know who Tyrone is. Arash, what do you think?
It's a little different for me. I'm Middle Eastern, but technically this country considers me white. So, if I'm being honest, the only racism I ever faced or the only issues I ever face when it comes to my race are some jokes about, hey, Iran hacked into this website again. Was that you, Arash? So, for the most part, culturally, it hasn't felt too weird for me. But I didn't notice it until you guys talked about it. I have noticed every single team I've been on now, I'm the only foreign person. You guys are absolutely right. There is kind of a lack of diversity within penetration testing and red teams because, and even then, I guess I'm barely foreign, but it is a very interesting point, and I got to wonder why to some extent. But when it comes to social engineering, it's never really affected me in any way. I don't have an accent or anything. Nobody can tell I'm Middle Eastern. I think what happens is because I'm a different race, I personally fall for stuff more often. I've had people social engineering me, like asking me what country I'm from and saying, oh, that's a really interesting country. I bet your mom's got some really weird maiden name. I'm like, yeah, she does have a weird maiden name. Here it is. It's like they don't have to ask it directly. I basically offer it up because we're just talking about culture,
Yeah, I do remember you having the big afro, Arash, and I'm just
I did have an
imagining you.
afro.
And then, like, what else? Like AJ can speak different languages fluently, but he just looks like, like an average white guy, right?
Yeah, yeah. I
Um,
guess that my team now is a little more diverse. Yeah, actually, but yeah, sorry.
cool, cool. Any
So,
questions from the
oh,
crowd?
sorry.
Or if you wanted to throw in something, Chantel.
Yeah, I just think this is such a great question, and it's really something to think about, especially if you're a person of color entering the pen testing or red teaming space. It is not diverse at all. I knew that coming into the field, I was likely going to be the only Black woman, in that space, and that's been the case ever since, I've entered the field. Um, but also recognize too, knowing that those biases exist in people's minds and knowing that you have racist people out there, like recognize that that's a weakness within them too that you can actually exploit. So like exploit from an engagement perspective. So yeah, there's certainly good and bad sides to it, but it gives you a lot to think about. And it's certainly something to think about when you start to apply for jobs at some of these companies. Research them heavily and their DEI initiatives.
And you know what? Like, and I know like this shouldn't be a joke, but I saw something on Twitter that made some sense, kind of, right? And I know it may sound bad coming out, but it was something to the fact that, some of the best physical pen testers are probably some locked up Black men in jail right now.
Mm-hmm. I can see that. I honestly could. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Any questions from the group before we close out? Yeah, we will post out contact info, I believe, in the registration. Everyone's Twitter handles are in the registration on the meetup page. We will post this video to the Cover6 website. Arash and Chantel will get a copy of the video as well, so they can post it wherever they like. We had another follow-up question on the white, gray, black spectrum of the boxes. Where do most real-world engagements fall?
I can start. In my experience, because I've actually done a lot of client work, I can say it's almost always black box. They prefer it that way. A lot of them don't want to just give us code. We have done tests, certainly, where they're like, here's code, and we have static code analysis tools, and we go through that too. But most of it is black box because that's the more realistic world scenario where an evil attacker is going to try to black box something. And so they want to simulate how far a black box attacker could get. But I will say that white boxing is always better. Time is money. When you can white box, you can look at code, you can find stuff faster, more efficiently. You don't have to do weird fuzzing anymore. And if you work for an internal organization, it's really important to, I think, convince them that, hey, we work together. You can show me some code. It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say for me and my experience, it's been mostly white and a mixture of white and gray. Definitely have been some black box testing in there, but it's mostly been white and gray. With red team engagements, it was always black box, of course. But yeah.
I actually prefer the black box in testing. Like, I like the mental aspect of figuring out the puzzle. Just give me, the name of the company, and if we're gonna like have to go by the scope, give me the scope, and then just let me go.
I agree. I think it's way more fun enumerating it yourself. And yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it definitely is way more fun.
Okay, so we can do a follow-up question. What are some of your favorite tools? And then we can end off with that.
There's so many tools.
Yeah.
There are countless tools. I would say, what's become my favorite tool actually recently? And I used to really not like it. It's gonna sound real basic. Metasploit.
Okay.
It's actually become more of one of my fave tools just because of like the timing with it. I don't know. It just some stuff, I don't know. It just does really, really well. I would also
very stable.
Yeah. Yeah, people would clown about using Metasploit, but it's effective. And if it's a tool that's gonna get you to get your job done, then why not use it just because you think someone thinks it's a rudimentary tool?
Right.
It's not. I would argue it's not because it's rudimentary.
Well, maybe that's a bad word, but you can make it as complex as you want. You can add custom modules to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. The issue is the template. So what happens is every single AV has found out exactly how to hook processes in just the right way such that they can detect Metasploit running in memory now. Now, this works really well for Windows, but it has no effect in Linux because EDRs just don't handle Linux well right now. So I think Metasploit is a spectacular tool. People actually love it. It's very stable. It works. It gets the job done. The issue is where AV comes in. And there are ways to bypass this. For example, people discovered if you take a Metasploit shellcode, make a custom injector, toss it into Explorer.exe, there's no hooking done on Explorer.exe because it's such a busy process. So if you just understand how to use Metasploit, it's absolutely not a joke.
Nice. I am a fan of the Metasploit database.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It just helps so much, like when it's time to do the appendixes, when it's time to search through your results, when it's time to like use an auxiliary module, right? And you have to like add hundreds of hosts to this new auxiliary module. It just makes life so much easier for me. I just fly through that thing when it comes to the enumeration,
I love it.
Yeah.
You were gonna go? I was gonna mention Bloodhound.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great one.
And there's the Evil WinRM.
Oh yeah.
That I'm growing fond of right now.
You know what's great? Speaking of evil tools like Evil WinRM, Seatbelt and Sharp DP API. Have you heard of these?
No.
You said Sharp what?
Sharp DP API. So
Wow.
DPAPI is a mechanism in Windows. So Windows, when they're storing things like your Chrome history, your Chrome logins, or a lot of stuff that's sensitive information, Windows likes to lock it down with what's called DPAPI keys, and it's basically an encryption mechanism. And so Sharp DPAPI is really fun because leveraging this, you can actually identify DPAPI keys even on remote machines, and you can do things like dump all the Chrome logins, dump all history, dump sessions for like RDP credentials. When you save an RDP credential on your machine, it's encrypted with DPAPI. But getting that key is as easy as impersonating a user and requesting it over RPC. And that's what Sharp DPAPI does. So LSASS is kind of dead. You can do everything with DPAPI in this day and age. You don't really need to touch LSASS anymore. That's why I love it.
Everything you just said made my heart flutter. Love it. Oh my God. Okay, I'm definitely gonna dive into that tool now.
And Seatbelt is cool because it just enumerates stuff. Seatbelt will tell you what's the app locker policy, what are the remote drives connected, what AD is running, what EDR is running. Seatbelt is just an awesome enumeration tool. I love running Seatbelt when I touch down on any machine.
All right.
Yeah, I'm just excited over here.
Yeah, I mean, I had a feeling we would end up geeking it up at some point, which is never a bad thing. If you all are interested, I would love to do like a part 2, maybe get really deep and technical.
Yeah.
Sure.
I think that would be fun. We are, out of time right now, but I want to thank you, Chantel, for stopping by. Arash, you as well. I want to thank all of the, attendees too for coming. This was really, really fun. We got to touch on, the business, the industry, certs, even personal aspects of it all. So I think this was really great in, what we can do in the hour that we have. So, this is good, I think. So thank you. Next week we have a talk about the Diana Initiative conference. So that is going to be fun. I look forward to seeing you all in the future. And with that said, we will close out. So thank you all again.